Kansas City was not supposed to be America's Mafia capital. It was not New York. It was not Chicago. But in the 1920s and 1930s, Kansas City became something even stranger. A city where politics, bootlegging, gambling, police protection, and jazz nightlife all moved through the same machine. The clubs stayed open. The drinks kept pouring. The votes kept coming. And behind the music, men like Johnny Lazia and boss Tom Pendergast turned corruption into a system. This is the real story of the wide-open town. Kansas City did not look like New York. It did not roar like Chicago. But in the 1920s and 1930s, it became one of America's most dangerous open cities. Alcohol, gambling, politics, police protection, jazz clubs, and backroom deals all moved through the same streets. The law had a badge, the machine had votes, and the underworld had cash. This is the real story of how Kansas City became a mafia city without needing to shout. People called it a wide-open town because vice was not hidden very well. It was organized. If someone wanted a drink during Prohibition, they knew where to go. If someone wanted a card game, a race bet, or a nightclub, Kansas City had a door waiting. The strange thing was not that crime existed. The strange thing was how comfortable it became, as if the city had quietly agreed to look away. The roots of Kansas City's underworld ran through the North End, the city's little Italy. It was a neighborhood of work, family, poverty, ambition, and fear. Men who could not get power through ordinary doors learned to take it through threats, favors, and loyalty. Before the big money came, there were smaller rackets, protection, gambling, and street control. The empire began not with luxury, but with pressure. Before the Mafia became a public legend, fear arrived in smaller ways. Threatening letters, demands for money, a warning placed where a family would find it. The Black Hand era made intimidation a business. It taught one brutal lesson. If people believed violence could come at any time, they would pay before it arrived. Kansas City's later bosses inherited that lesson and improved it. Tom Pendergast did not need a gun in his hand to control Kansas City. He understood jobs, favors, contracts, and votes. His political machine helped people who needed work, food, and protection. In return, many people gave loyalty at the ballot box. To supporters, he was useful. To enemies, he was dangerous. To the underworld, he was the kind of power that could make crime feel protected. When America outlawed alcohol, Kansas City did not become dry. It became more valuable. A bottle that had been ordinary suddenly became a legal profit. Every tavern needed supply. Every hidden club needed protection. Every thirsty customer became part of the market. Prohibition did not kill drinking in Kansas City. It turned drinking into a system. On paper, Kansas City had mayors, police, judges, and laws. In practice, power moved through a second government. Ward bosses delivered votes. Gangsters delivered muscle. Police protection could be bought. Gambling money could become political money. The machine and the mob did not always need to meet in public. They only needed the same city to keep working. Johnny Lazia became the face of Kansas City's criminal rise. He was not just a street criminal. He understood image, politics, money, and loyalty. He moved between gambling rooms, political clubs, and public events as if all of them belonged to the same world. By the late 1920s, Lazia was not simply surviving in the North End. He was learning how to organize it. Bootlegging needed ingredients, routes, storage, drivers, guards, and silence. In Kansas City, the business became organized around the supply chain of illegal alcohol. Sugar was more than something for kitchens. It was the beginning of fermentation, the beginning of product, and the beginning of profit. The underworld learned that a good racket did not need chaos. It needed management. The relationship was simple in the way dangerous things are simple. The machine needed votes, loyalty, and muscle. The mob needed freedom to operate. One side could deliver political power. The other could deliver street power. Between them, Kansas City became a place where gambling rooms stayed open, speakeasies kept pouring, and people who asked too many questions learned to lower their voices. In Kansas City, elections were not always clean civic rituals. They could become operations. Cars moved people. Ward workers watched corners. Favors were remembered. Pressure was applied quietly. The same organization that protected vice could also protect power. A ballot could be as important as a bullet, because control of the city began with control of who counted. A criminal city does not survive on criminals alone. It survives when enforcement becomes selective. Some officers did their jobs. Others understood the machine. Some looked away because they were afraid. Others looked away because it paid. When the street believes the police can be influenced, fear changes shape. People stop asking who broke the law and start asking who permitted it. Inside the clubs, Kansas City looked alive. Jazz filled the room. Glasses clinked. Money moved from table to table. A customer could forget that the drink was illegal because everyone around him was pretending it was normal. But behind the music were suppliers, collectors, guards, and bosses. The party had a shadow, and that shadow sent money back into the machine. Alcohol made fortunes, but it was not the only business. Dice, cards, horse racing, policy games, loans, and protection all fed the same appetite. Kansas City did not need one giant racket. It had many smaller streams of money that flowed into the same dark river. A city that tolerated vice could turn every weakness into revenue. Johnny Lazia understood that fear was stronger when it wore a respectable suit. He appeared in public. He built a profile. He surrounded himself with business names, clubs, and political connections. A gangster who looked too much like a gangster could become a target. A gangster who looked like a civic figure could move through Kansas City with surprising ease. The city had a strange bargain with its own darkness. People knew things. They heard names. They saw clubs open all night. But the music was good, the jobs mattered, and the machine could be generous. Corruption rarely sells itself as evil. It sells itself as stability. And for many people in Kansas City, stability was easier to accept than reform. In 1929, America's underworld was learning how to think beyond city lines. Mob figures from different regions saw that cooperation could be more profitable than constant war. Kansas City's presence in that world mattered. It showed that the city was not just a local vice town. It had become part of the national conversation of organized crime. When the Depression hit, hunger changed politics. A man who could provide a job became powerful. A machine that could deliver food or work could win loyalty that speeches could not. The same system accused of corruption could also look like survival to people with empty pockets. That is why Boss Tom's power became so hard to break. Power did not only live in clubs and alleys. It lived in contracts. Roads, buildings, public works, and city projects created money and influence. The machine could decide who worked, who supplied, and who got rewarded. This was the quieter side of the empire, less dramatic than a gunfight, but in many ways more important. At night, Kansas City became music, smoke, and money. The jazz scene made the city famous, but the same nighttime economy created cover for gambling and bootlegging. A club could be culture, business, and racket all at once. That was the genius of the wide-open town. The legal and illegal worlds did not always stand apart. They danced in the same room. The profits did not stay in alley rooms. They bought apartments, resorts, boats, horses, suits, and influence. Lazia's world showed how quickly street power could become luxury. The public saw a successful man. Rivals saw a target. Federal agents saw something else. Income that did not match the story he told on paper. No criminal empire stays calm forever. Money attracts ambition. Protection creates resentment. Younger men want what older men control. By the early 1930s, Kansas City's underworld was no longer just building. It was cracking. The same system that organized vice also created winners and losers in that world rarely filed complaints. Kidnapping shook Kansas City in the early 1930s. Wealthy families, political figures, and criminals all understood the same terrifying fact. Protection was not always guaranteed by the law. Sometimes the underworld itself moved faster. Sometimes mob connections helped find victims. That made the city even stranger. The same criminals who helped create fear could also appear as the men who solved it. When Nell Donnelly and her chauffeur were abducted, the case showed how deeply unofficial power reached. The city did not only depend on police channels. It depended on hidden networks, friends of friends, and men who knew where criminals hid. In Kansas City, the underworld was not outside the city's nervous system. It was part of it. The kidnapping of Mary McElroy, daughter of the city manager, made the pattern even clearer. Power in Kansas City moved through official and unofficial hands. Ransom, influence, and street knowledge all became tools. A normal city would treat that as scandal. Kansas City treated it as another sign that the hidden government knew more than the visible one. Frank Nash was not a Kansas City boss, but his capture and return through the city would become one of the most important crime events of the era. He had escaped from Leavenworth and moved through underworld protection. When federal officers caught him and brought him toward Kansas City, criminals decided to gamble on a rescue. That gamble would stain Union Station forever. The plan was supposed to be simple: meet the prisoner, overwhelm the officers, and free Frank Nash before he disappeared back into federal custody. But criminal plans are often written in confidence and executed in panic. The men preparing the rescue were armed, nervous, and dangerous. They thought speed would save them. Instead, speed would make the tragedy worse. On the morning of June 17, 1933, Union Station looked ordinary. A train arrived. Officers moved through the building. A prisoner walked under guard. Cars waited outside. Nobody in that moment could see the full disaster forming. Kansas City had known vice, corruption, and violence before, but this morning would force the whole country to look directly at it. The shooting lasted only moments, but it changed the city's reputation for years. 4 lawmen and Frank Nash were killed in the attempt. The rescue failed. The prisoner died with the officers sent to move him. Kansas City's hidden violence had stepped into daylight, right outside one of its most public buildings. A wide-open town had become a national crime scene. Before Union Station, Kansas City could be explained away as colorful, corrupt, musical, and wild. After Union Station, it looked dangerous. The massacre shocked the public and intensified federal attention. Criminals who had relied on local protection now faced a different kind of pressure. The city's old bargain began to fail because the audience was no longer local. Federal investigators followed names, weapons, hideouts, and witnesses. The case pulled together outlaws, gang contacts, and possible protection networks. In a city where many things could once be settled quietly, the Union Station Massacre became too loud to bury. The machine could influence Kansas City. It could not easily silence Washington. Johnny Lazia's power depended on usefulness. As long as he helped the machine and controlled the streets, he had value. But national attention changed the equation. After Union Station, the underworld looked less like a profitable partner and more like a danger. The same connections that had lifted Lazia now made him visible to enemies, reformers, and federal agents. Like many crime figures of the era, Lazia found that taxes could be more dangerous than street rivals. A man could deny 1,000 rumors, but numbers on paper were harder to explain. Federal income tax charges placed pressure on the Kansas City boss. Even powerful friends could not make the problem disappear forever. As rivalries deepened, the city's violence became more serious. Weapons moved through hidden channels. Cars carried men who were not just gamblers or bootleggers, but shooters. Kansas City's criminal world had grown from neighborhood rackets into something heavier. The machine could manage votes and contracts, but controlling armed ambition was another problem. Criminal systems often look strongest right before they start fighting themselves. Kansas City had money, protection, and influence, but every piece of that success created competition. Men who once followed orders began looking for openings. Every club, gambling room, and delivery route became something worth killing over. The underworld was becoming unstable from inside. In the early hours of July 10, 1934, Johnny Lazia returned home. He had moved through Kansas City like a man who believed the city knew him, protected him, and owed him. Then gunmen appeared from the shadows. The attack ended the career of the man who had carried Kansas City's mob to national prominence. The wide-open town had eaten one of its own. Even near death, the political connection remained the center of the story. Lazia's last reported words pointed toward Tom Pendergast, the friend and power broker who had helped make him untouchable. That detail matters because it shows what Kansas City had become. A dying gangster did not think only of enemies. He thought of the machine. Lazia's funeral became a spectacle. Crowds came. Money showed. The criminal boss received a send-off that looked almost royal. That was Kansas City's contradiction. A man tied to rackets and violence could still draw public fascination and loyalty. The funeral did not hide the underworld. It displayed how deeply it had entered the city's imagination. When one boss falls, the business does not stop. Charles Carollo moved into the space Lazia left behind. The names changed, but the racket still needed supervision. Gambling still wanted protection. Clubs still wanted supply. The political machine still needed street influence. Kansas City's underworld was wounded, not dead. After Lazia's death, Tom Pendergast remained the larger force. His machine still reached across Kansas City and Missouri politics. He had survived scandals, accusations, and enemies before, but the old protection was weakening. The city's corruption had become too famous, and the federal government was learning the same lesson it learned with gangsters: follow the money. Kansas City was not only bosses and gangsters. Reformers, civic groups, religious voices, and ordinary citizens pushed back. They complained of election fraud, vice, graft, and fear. Their voices did not always win quickly, but they kept pressure alive. Every corrupt machine depends on exhaustion. Reform begins when people refuse to stay exhausted. Newspapers helped turn rumor into public memory. Headlines made corruption harder to ignore. Crime scenes became images. Names became symbols. In a city where so much power depended on quiet arrangements, publicity became dangerous. A backroom deal can survive a whisper. It struggles under a front-page headline. The federal government did not need to prove every rumor about Kansas City. It needed a case that could hold. Taxes became the sharpest weapon. Income, payments, favors, and unexplained money could do what political speeches could not. The same kind of financial pressure that caught gangsters began moving toward Boss Tom. Pendergast's fall came through money. Federal prosecutors tied him to income tax evasion, connected to a large payment from a fire insurance dispute. The details were less cinematic than a gangster ambush, but the result was more devastating. A machine that had survived noise, vice, and scandal was being cornered by accounting. In 1939, the man who had shaped Kansas City politics for a generation faced federal punishment. Pendergast was sentenced to prison for income tax evasion. The message was clear. The old order was no longer untouchable. The city had seen gangsters fall before. Now it watched the political machine itself bleed. Leavenworth had held bank robbers, gangsters, and men like Frank Nash. Now Kansas City's political boss entered that world too. The symbolism was impossible to miss. The machine that had protected vice could not protect its own creator from federal prison. Kansas City's second government had finally reached a wall it could not bribe. When a boss falls, a city does not become clean in a single morning. Habits remain, people remain, money roots remain. But something had changed in Kansas City's imagination. The old certainty was gone. Men who once seemed permanent now looked mortal. Power had been exposed as something that could be investigated, charged, and sentenced. Organized crime did not vanish with Pendergast. It adapted. The wide-open town became less open. The rackets moved more carefully. Protection became less public. The lesson was not morality, it was survival. Kansas City's underworld learned that too much visibility could kill a business faster than any rival. One reason Kansas City's story is complicated is that its nightlife was not only criminal, it was also cultural. Jazz gave the city a sound that outlasted the men who exploited the night economy. The same streets that carried vice also carried music. The legacy is not clean. It is layered like smoke in a club that refuses to clear. By the 1940s, America's attention turned toward war. Cities changed their rhythms. Soldiers moved through stations. Factories worked, but vice never fully slept. Gambling, drinking, and rackets found new forms around new crowds. Kansas City's underworld had lost its old political shield. but it still understood demand. Kansas City matters because it shows a different model of underworld power. Chicago had famous violence. New York built national administration. Kansas City showed how politics, local identity, vice, and organized crime could become almost one ecosystem. It was not just a mob city. It was a machine city, and that made it especially hard to separate crime from government. The Kansas City story is not only about who shot whom, it is about systems. A ballot box could protect a bottle. A police badge could protect a gambling room. A public contract could create private wealth. A gangster could become useful to a politician. A politician could become useful to a gangster. That is why the city was so dangerous. Behind every legendary crime story are people who did not choose the legend. Shopkeepers paid. Families feared kidnappers. Honest officers walked into danger. Citizens watched elections lose meaning. Crime history often remembers the bosses because they were dramatic, but cities are not built from bosses. They are built from ordinary people who live with the consequences. Union Station became more than a building in the Kansas City story. It became a symbol of the moment when hidden violence broke into public space. A train station is supposed to mean movement, arrival, reunion. In 1933, it became a place of national shock. The ghosts of that morning never fully left the city's memory. Lazia died. Pendergast went to prison. Others took their places, then faded too. But the chair is the point. Power always creates a seat someone else wants. Kansas City's underworld was not built by one man alone. It was built by conditions: law, hunger, greed, politics, silence, and opportunity. Kansas City learned that corruption can look useful until the bill arrives. It can provide jobs, entertainment, protection, and favors, but it also weakens trust, bends law, and teaches criminals that the city is negotiable. The fall of the machine did not erase the past. It simply proved that even deeply rooted power can be pulled into the light. Today, the story survives in files, photographs, court records, newspaper pages, and local memory. These fragments tell a darker truth than legend. Kansas City's Mafia history was not just a collection of colorful gangsters. It was a lesson in how a city can be captured gradually through favors, fear, and the comfort of looking away. So who owned Kansas City? Was it the politicians who counted the votes? The gangsters who collected the money? The police who looked away? The citizens who tolerated the bargain because it seemed to work? The answer is uncomfortable. No single man owned the city. The system owned it, and many people helped keep that system alive. Bosses die, machines collapse, clubs close, cars rust. But cities remember in layers. Kansas City outlived the men who tried to control it. Yet the story remains because it shows how fragile public trust can be. The wide-open town was not just a nickname. It was a warning. Kansas City's Mafia story was not the loudest in America. That may be why it is so powerful. It did not need to burn like Chicago or command like New York. It operated through politics, nightlife, loyalty, and silence. And for a time, that was enough. The city had a government everyone could see, and another one waiting behind the music. Historical source notes used for this script. This script is based on real historical references from FBI history page on the Kansas City Massacre and Pretty Boy Floyd. Kansas City Public Library, Kansas City Star article on Johnny Lazia and Prohibition era, Kansas City. The Pendergast Years article on John F. Lazia, Encyclopedia Britannica article on Thomas J. Pendergast. Social Welfare History Project article on the Pendergast machine. This documentary should feel less like a school lesson and more like a dark city story